President Biden Monday morning announcing that he commuted the death sentences of Chadrick Folks and Brandon Basham. Both were accused of carjacking and killing Lincoln County native Samantha Burns.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, it's ayebeepee and welcome back to my channel. I've got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in psychology. I'm going to say that for the next 21 videos because I'm just so proud of myself. On top of that, I'm a board member for a nonprofit called Voices for the Silence, and we help missing person cases around West Virginia, and we just help in any way we can with the families in need that are looking for their missing loved ones. So if you do know someone that is missing around the West Virginia area, please get a hold of us and we'll do what we can. And we are here with another one in the Unsolved in West Virginia series. This one has a crazy background to it, along with President Biden making a decision that significantly, in my opinion and other people's opinion, harmed this case and the family. She is from around kind of where I live, like less than an hour away. She actually went to the same college I did, so this one is kind of near and dear to my heart. So if you want to learn more about Samantha Burns, let's just get right in. Samantha was born on April 21st, 1983, and she was 19 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was from Hamlin and actually graduated from Guyan Valley High School. She graduated in 2001 and then ended up going to Marshall University. She also had gotten a job at the Huntington Mall at Chesapeake. She is a white female around 5'4" and around 110 pounds. She did have brunette hair and hazel eyes, and she had a mole on her neck and a chickenpox scar on the right side of her forehead. Her ears were pierced, her tongue was pierced, and she did have a tattoo of a butterfly on her low back. She went by Sam or Sammy, so I'll call her Sam for the rest of this video. And Samantha lived with her parents and younger brother, her mom being Candy Burns and her dad being John Burns. And she was going to Marshall for a PTA program. She did have a 1999 Chevrolet Cavalier. There was a tiger sticker on the back window on the driver's side, and the license plate was 5X9326. On November 11th, she did end up going to work this night, and around 6:30 p.m. her aunt, Tammy Atkins, went to the store because she wanted to buy Sam's cousin a few different clothes. And so the aunt went to JCPenney's so she could go say hi to Sam and kind of catch up with her a little bit. And she said at this time Sam was perfectly fine. She was just working and, had plans with her friends afterwards. Around 9:45 p.m. she talked to her mom on her phone and told her she was going to the Marshall University Courtyard Apartments to go visit with some friends after work. But she never showed up. Ever. Not to the apartments or not even back to her house. And at some point her phone was shut off. And this was just not like Sam. She always had her phone on. Now at the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a fuzzy orange sweater over a tank top. She had low-cut jeans on that were flare at the bottom, light tan suede mule-type shoes, a heart-shaped gold necklace with a diamond set in the middle of the heart, diamond stud earrings, with a leopard print purse with a lilac-colored lighter. Now, they pretty much filed Sam an endangered missing person pretty immediately. Foul play was suspected during this, and they were able to tell that her phone was turned off at 3:30 a.m. on the 12th, so just a few hours after she got off of work. Now, her car was found in a secluded area around German Ridge and Haney Branch Road, and this is kind of near the Cabell-Wayne County line. And what's really scary is that this car was set on fire at some point. It was actually still burning when they found it, but there was no sign of Sam anywhere near, around, or in this car. Now, in just a few days after she went missing, they were able to deem 2 suspects in this case. There was Chadrick Fulks and Brandon Basham. Now, they had escaped from the Hopkins County Jail on November 4th, and this was just a week before Sam's disappearance. Now, this video is obviously about Sam and her disappearance, but it's only fair to describe to you this crime spree that Chadrick and Brandon went on. And I know crime spree sounds dramatic, but just wait until you find out everything that these 2 did. Now, Chadrick and Brandon were cellmates. Chadrick was 25. He was from Huntington and had a long criminal history. He had multiple charges on hurting women that he dated, and this also includes. He also claimed to have stolen quite a bit to support his girlfriend's 3-year-old son. On August 25th, 2002, he had stolen a credit card and had forced his girlfriend to go into Walmart and buy something with it. I think it was a necklace. I could have that wrong, but I think it was a necklace. She went into this store and actually got a hold of the police, either called them or talked to one of them there in Walmart. She told them that Chadrick was in the parking lot, but he had a gun and she was scared he was going to kill her. So when the police came, Chadrick had actually stolen multiple credit cards and for sure did have that gun that his girlfriend was talking about. Now, Chadrick and his girlfriend were arrested. Obviously, there must be a little bit more to the story if the girlfriend was arrested too. And the son was put in foster care. And Chadrick was charged with robbery and 12 counts of credit card fraud. And after being in prison for a few months, he was charged with first-degree child abuse. And this obviously comes from the 3-year-old son of his girlfriend's. Now, Brandon was 19. He was from Kentucky. He had previously served time for forging checks and was actually in jail at that time for forgery. Again, and these 2 decided they did not want to be in prison anymore. So they started forming a plan. And on November 4th, around 6:30 p.m., Brandon asked the correctional officer if him and Chadrick could go to the Hopkins County Detention Center, recreational area. Now, the officer did take them out there and then went in to distribute meds to other prisoners. When he came back out around 8 p.m., they were gone. And it was clear that they had made a rope out of blankets and sheets, and that's how it was done. Now, when we get into November 5th, they had walked 10 miles to Hanson, Kentucky. Now, Brandon walked up to this James Hawkins and asked if he could use his phone because his car broke down. James said yeah and let him use his phone for 2 phone calls. And then James did ask him if he needed a ride to the local convenience store. They got in his truck and then Chadrick also jumped in and threatened him with a knife. And he had James drive them all the way to southern Indiana, a whole other state. Brandon and Chadrick then tied him to a tree and just took off with his truck and went to Portage, Indiana. They then left this truck there and went to their friend Tina's house. She had a roommate named Andrea, and Andrea had ended up working at the jail that Chadrick was in at one point, and they had actually known each other that way and kept in touch. Now, Tina and Andrea drove Chadrick and Brandon to a hotel, and all 4 of them ended up staying 2 nights together at this hotel. Now, Chadrick asked Tina if she knew where to get a gun, and she said actually her friend Robert owned multiple, and he lived in Michigan City, Indiana, so they started to head their way there. Tina and Andrea got Robert out of the house when Chadrick and Brandon went in and just robbed the place. They took multiple guns, they took jewelry, and they took checkbooks. And then they ended up driving to Sturgis, Michigan, where they got another hotel. Man, they are putting in work. Being out 2 days and being in 3 different states. Brandon and Andrea ended up staying the night at this hotel, but Tina and Chadrick actually drove to Goshen, Indiana, because Chadrick's brother Ronnie lived there, and they ended up hanging out with him and smoking together. Now, Tina and Chadrick went back for Andrea and Brandon on November 8th. Now, Brandon was really freaked out because the police had came and knocked on their hotel room door. Now, they didn't answer and they were very quiet and just acted like nobody was in there, but it wigged him out. When Tina and Chadrick got back to the hotel, he was sitting on the floor with a gun, and he just said he thought the police had caught up to them and that he knew he was going to have to shoot them. So they ended up talking Brandon down, like everything's okay, you know, they're not coming after us, and they packed up and went to Ronnie's house, Chadrick's brother. Now, on November 10th, the 4 of them went to Ohio. They ended up using bad checks to buy products and then returning them for cash. And when they went to Walmart, Chadrick had stolen a cell phone and a purse out of a car. On November 11th, they drove to Canova, West Virginia. They ended up checking into a motel, and Tina and Andrea stayed there while Chadrick and Brandon went out. They were smoking and trying to steal purses out of cars at the Huntington Mall. Yeah, same day that Sam goes missing. Now, they split up to look for cars to break into. Chadrick somehow ended up getting Samantha's car with Samantha in the passenger seat. Now, Chadrick and Brandon end up switching places. Chadrick goes to drive Tina's van while Brandon goes to drive Sam's car. They drove to a nearby Foodland where they left Tina's van. They took Samantha's car to several ATM machines and had her try to make as many withdrawals as she could. Now, Chadrick was driving back to Foodland to get the van. Now, Brandon said he wanted to find a place to do whatever he wanted to do with Samantha. So they headed towards a secluded place on the Ohio River. Now, Brandon and Samantha went where you really couldn't see them for about 30 minutes, is what Chadrick said. But Brandon came back alone and said he wanted to get gas to be able to pour all over Samantha's car to set it on fire. Brandon seemed really worried about fingerprints, and he thought this would get rid of them. Now, they ended up burning Samantha's car, and Brandon and Chadrick went back to the hotel. And we still, might I add, have no idea where Samantha's body was. And granted, I guess we don't even really know if this whole story is true, right? But this is what they are saying happened. Now, on November 12th, pretty much like the early morning hours, that's when Chadrick and Brandon showed up to the motel again, covered in mud. So the 4 ended up driving to Little River, South Carolina. Now, Chadrick had lived there before, so he kind of knew the area. And Brandon kept asking Tina if she wanted to go swimming in the Ohio River, and she really wasn't sure what this ever meant or why he brought this up, because they were clearly going to South Carolina now, but it is weird, right? So the girls even said that the van was covered in mud also, and that there was a box for a Marshall University fundraiser now in the van. Samantha's ID was also found in there. But you have to think, the girls had no idea what was happening with Sam. They had no idea that they had captured a girl and did whatever in the woods, right? They didn't know they had set her car on fire. They knew nothing about Samantha. So finding this ID was like, that's weird. But it never crossed their mind that this could be a missing person we would be talking about today. And it was noted that on November 12th, Brandon started wearing a heart-shaped necklace with a diamond set in the center of the heart. And Brandon said he had stole this necklace from a car. So again, there wasn't really much for these girls to worry about because they were already stealing things from cars. Like, they knew that's how they were getting around. Now, they did end up staying in Little River, where they got a hotel room and they drank and smoked together and just kind of hung out. Now, on November 14th, they left for Myrtle Beach. Now, Tina and Andrea ended up staying at the hotel, but Brandon and Chadrick went out to find more guns, money, anything really. Now they ended up breaking into a home of Sam Jordan's. Now while they were driving away, Sam's dad did drive by Chadrick. So Chadrick, of course, did the most logical thing by using Tina's van to ram into Carl's car, Sam's dad. So Brandon came out of the house and shot to try to scare Carl off. And he ended up hitting the greenhouse. So Carl did end up driving away while Chadrick and Brandon kept shooting at him. Now they got rid of Tina's van and stole a white pickup truck. And at 2:37 p.m., Alice Donovan drove her BMW into a parking lot. She was 42 years old and she was a mom of 2. And Chadrick and Brandon were driving behind her. She was trying to get some last minute things for Thanksgiving dinner. Now Chadrick was circling her in a white pickup truck and Brandon walked up to her door. And they ended up taking Alice's car and leaving the white pickup truck there. Chadrick drove while Alice and Brandon were in the back seat. And they did the same thing as Sam. They drove to multiple ATMs and had her withdraw as much money as she could. They then went to North Carolina and went to a cemetery. And this is where Chadrick and Brandon said they hurt Alice. They never really said what they did, I don't think, but they did say they hurt her here. Alice knew that they were going to hurt her, so she had begged them to leave the gun in the car. But Brandon was like, yeah, absolutely not. And once again, Brandon walked Alice away from the car, and he was the only one to come back. And then these two went back to the motel with Tina and Andrea, and they had said the police had taken Tina's van. Now, Brandon and Chadrick said they needed to go back to West Virginia without the girls. And this is when Chadrick said that on the way to West Virginia, Brandon finally admitted to killing Samantha and Alice. On November 15th, they went back to Huntington. They spent 2 nights there with one of Chadrick's friends while they smoked. And on November 17th, around 7:30, Brandon and Chadrick went to another parking lot where they were breaking into cars. Now, Brandon tried to steal a car from a woman and her 15-year-old daughter in the Ashland Town Center Mall. They were actually able to escape and call the police. There was an officer nearby, so they took off trying to chase down Chadrick and Brandon on foot. Now, Brandon ended up hiding behind train cars near the Ohio River, but he was finally arrested around 9 p.m. Now later that night, Chadrick saw on the news that Brandon was arrested, and this absolutely freaked Chadrick right out. So the next day, Chadrick ended up taking Alice's BMW and headed towards his brother's house in Indiana. But while he was driving through Ohio, a trooper did notice that was a car that had been reported missing. There ended up being a high-speed chase that reached up to 130 miles per hour. So Chadrick was able to get away from this police officer and head to his brother's. But they kind of figured that's where he was going. Now, his brother and his girlfriend did try to pull Alice's BMW into this barn type thing, shed, to, hide it from police. But they had actually put surveillance outside of Ronnie's house already because they figured that's where Chadrick was going to go. So they saw everything. So on the 20th, Chadrick was arrested at his brother's house. Now, Chadrick was arrested in Indiana near Goshen. And it didn't take them long to become suspects in Samantha and Alice's disappearances. Now, Chadrick had admitted to everything against him, but he did say he did not kill Samantha or Alice. Now, the FBI actually interviewed Brandon for 7 hours, and he was questioned about everything that had been going on since they escaped their jail. Now, he did admit to some crimes in different states, and he did admit to kidnapping Alice. But he blamed Chadwick and said she was alive and with him. He said that Brandon dropped him back off at the hotel, and Chadwick and Alice drove off with her alive in the car. He also said that Chadwick was the one who raped, strangled, and stabbed Alice. And we hadn't heard anything yet on what had happened to this girl. And he also said Chadwick had gotten a girl from West Virginia, which we now know was Samantha. Now, Brandon and Chadwick were held without bond. They knew this would be a lengthy trial, and prosecution had said they were for sure seeking the death penalty for both men. And I would still like to reiterate that to this day, Samantha's body has never been found. In June 2003, the boys were finally charged in Donovan's and Burns' case. In Alice Donovan's case, they were charged with carjacking resulting in death and kidnapping resulting in death. In Samantha Burns' case, they were charged with carjacking resulting in death. Now, the police did believe even without Samantha's body, there was enough to prove that they had murdered her and did something with her, and they were convicted in separate trials. Now, Chadwick's legal team tried to blame Brandon for everything, pretty much, but the judge refused to even think about dealing with this finger pointing, and he actually ended up saying, "It didn't matter. No sentence is going to change what you did to these people." So then they did try to say Chadwick was a product of his upbringing. They said he was raised by abusive alcoholics, and they said that he was a victim of the fetal alcoholic spectrum disorder, and they said that he could not kill without influence from somewhere else. So in May 2004, Chadwick just ended up pleading guilty to the Alice Donovan case, and he was sentenced to death. In September 2004, a federal judge in South Carolina did find Brandon guilty for Alice Donovan's case also, and he also was sentenced to death. But they only confessed to the carjacking resulting in death only. Brandon also did apologize to Sam's family. "I know she had something I never had. She had a good family that loved her and cared for her. I helped Chad take her away. I wish I could bring her back, but I can't." But Candy, Sam's mom, responded, "It's too late to tell us sorry." And they were both sentenced to life in prison. And I want to read you the victim impact statements of her parents in this case, because I just really believe they need to have their voice heard in this. John Burns said, "You took my son's only sibling. You took my wife's best friend. You took my little girl. You're pure evil. I hope what you've done eats away at your mind and soul for the rest of your life." And Candy Burns said, "All of her dreams were taken away from her on those hours of a cold and I imagine frightful night. Samantha would have given you her car and her money, so why did you have to do things to her? She was there by herself. I feel so hopeless that I couldn't be there to help her." So after his arrest, Brandon did try to help find Alice's body. He tried to draw maps and all of that. And then on November 26, 2005, and Brandon finally admitted that Samantha was dead and said that Chadwick had done it, but had him roll her down an embankment. So this sparked the investigators really working to find these bodies. Now, Brandon was really trying to get his sentence shortened. I mean, he had the worst possible sentence, right? So him and his team, FBI, law enforcement, all went out to try to find Alice's body first. So they went to North Carolina, where he thought he had taken Alice's body. And on the way there, he had said, "I never could kill a deer, and here I have," and his lawyers cut him off. Now, Brandon took him to the cemetery we talked about earlier and said this is where Alice's body was. Now, they couldn't find Alice, but they did find her purse strap. Now, in October 2008, Chadwick wrote the Sun News in Myrtle Beach and had said that drug use is what caused him to do all these things throughout these days. I mean, he was using various substances, but he said he really did want to help find Alice's remains. The Q Center for Missing Persons actually found remains in Horry County on January 25th, 2009. And it was clear that it was Alice, and it was weird because this was not where Brandon said she would be. And then they heard from Chadwick saying that he wanted to help find Samantha's remains and gave them an area where she was. So in September 2009, they searched all over the town of Lavalette. Nothing was found. Now, the state police and FBI agents in 2009 also tried to search for Samantha. It was near a train track at the intersection of Buffalo Creek Road and West Virginia 75 near Spring Valley. And they even allowed Chadwick to leave his jail or prison, I can't remember which one he's in at this point, and come look for Samantha. But again, nothing was found.
All the things that he says to look for, what have you, we're just not locating it on the track. Even if we go on the wrong side of the track, we just don't think that either one, he doesn't know where she really is, or two, he just can't remember and he's guessing.
Now, this is also just another crazy part of this case, unfortunately. But there also was a search in Chesapeake, Ohio. This was in July 2017 when a Facebook post came up saying that Samantha Burns was on the property of his ex-wife's place. Jimmy Heisel had went live on Facebook, and Jimmy was known as kind of like a textbook hillbilly, I guess. He was very intense, very straightforward. He was very unpredictable, and that made people very nervous around him. He did like to party, and he owned a tattoo shop. Him and his ex-wife Rebecca had been together for about a year. They were married for about 2 months, and they were definitely having some issues in their relationship at this point. He said that he was wanting to build a koi pond when he moved in, but she just would not let him, and he asked for like 5 months, and she just kept saying no. And he said, well, he started digging anyway and found what he thought was human bones. And he said when he went back to see this, that the bones had disappeared and that he thought Rebecca had threw them in the pig pen next door. He began to cry and saying that his wife said there was other bodies on that property. He said this has been haunting him and he just can't sleep knowing this. And he had promised investigators that they would find human remains. He started posting videos all over Facebook in case something happened to him, and Facebook eventually just started shutting him down for harassment. The first video was who he was, who Rebecca was, what she told him, how he wanted to bring justice. He showed the burn pile and said he found several burner phones on the property. There were other videos of him on the phone with Rebecca, him just being very angry and fed up, and he started saying Rebecca was a thief. He said that she had scammed Humana and that Jimmy had forged signatures for her. He said that Rebecca did not kill Samantha, but definitely helped move the body. And he claimed that Samantha was decapitated, put her in trash bags, dropped her off at a construction site, brought her then to Rebecca's house, and said there was a smell of burning flesh. He pressured his wife to tell the police about this, but she refused. She said she didn't want to become an accessory, and he said he was going himself. But Jimmy's story kept changing though. First, there was only 2 bodies on the property, but then it got up to 4. He also said him and his wife had only known each other for about 5 or 6 months. And he said that they sat in the parking lot for at least a half an hour to go over their alibi. But Rebecca's story never changed with the police. She also said that Jimmy had threatened to kill her. that it was just a very abusive situation and that she went to the police about this because she was scared. So they were able to grant her a DVP. Jimmy was leaving anyway when he was served, but he ended up leaving her a voicemail saying, "See you in court." Now on the DVP on July 3rd, it explained what kind of happened to bring up this Samantha thing. She said they had had a couple of drinks and that Jimmy had told her to tell her a dark secret. She said that she had known two people that were convicted of killing people, Brandon Basham and a Mitchell Vickers. Jimmy said that was nothing and got on the computer. Jimmy then ended up getting off of the computer and ended up screaming at her for about 12 hours. He then swore Samantha's body was on her property and thought it was in the burn bins next to the house. And he said he knew this was accurate because she knew Brandon. He wanted to go to the police, so the police and FBI ended up coming over, and Jimmy left around 11 p.m. right before the police did. Jimmy returned at 2 a.m., now July 4th, and he said he did not feel comfortable leaving her in the house alone with all these guns. So he took only one gun and left. He came home around 9 a.m. and was acting completely normal, and he did have the gun with him. But around 3 hours later, he got completely erratic again. He demanded she tell him everything. She said that Mitchell told her there was a body in the fire pit and that if she told anybody, he would kill her and the kids. Jimmy started yelling about how many times fires were there and telling her she had to go to an FBI agent. And then he started threatening her to put her in prison. So later that evening, he got up and started yelling again. So she ended up getting up and going and getting a bottle of water. Jimmy then ended up shooting the gun in 2 different directions, and he just said that it was the 4th of July. He had the right to carry a gun on him if he wanted to because he was in the room with a serial killer. So she was like, whatever, and she went to bed. She called the FBI first thing in the morning, and she met with the FBI at her house when Jimmy wasn't there. She texted him to let him know that she was home, and he said that he did not feel comfortable meeting her at her house because of what she has done and the people she knows, but would meet her out somewhere. This guy is obnoxious. They then met at Kroger, and she told him, "Hey, I listened to you, went to the FBI," and he got extremely mad because she did it behind his back. She then started getting really scared he was going to physically hurt her because he kept saying, "I don't have a problem breaking a woman's jaw," and talking about how he stabbed someone before. She then went home and packed some things to leave. Jimmy then called her and threatened her to fear for her life. He then said that he had 37 malicious wounding charges in the past, and some were from when he was in prison serving a 10-year sentence. And he said he was not afraid of the police. She then went to stay with a friend in which he called her multiple times. There were 11 texts between 3:29 and 11:18 p.m. And then there were 12 other texts between 2:30 and 7:30 a.m. There were multiple messages on Facebook, and he kept telling her to tell all she knew so she could get a deal, and said that she was going to end up on death row. And then Jimmy gets on Facebook and starts calling her a serial killer. He then started sending her different pictures of friends and family members with no real explanation why. So she had to go file a violation of the protection order not even a day after she received it. And he just kept on over Facebook, texts, and messages and calls. Now on July 10th, they received a search warrant for her property. Rebecca was asked to come to the property since she was not staying there at that time. And they did an extensive dig around the burn pile. I mean, they sifted through dirt and ash, and they had to stop right when it got a little too dark. An officer ended up sleeping there to make sure that nothing was disturbed. And this whole time, Rebecca was just extremely cooperative. And she had even invited the Burns family to her home just in case something was found, or if they wanted to talk to her or anything like that. She was very open to them. Now, Chadwick and Brandon have appealed their case multiple times and have failed every single time. Brandon did try to commit suicide on March 31st, 2003. So his lawyer ended up fighting for him to go to a private facility in South Carolina. Samantha and Alice's family did end up filing wrongful death lawsuits against the Hopkins County Jail, and it was settled for an undisclosed amount in August 2008. And every spring since 2005, there is a softball tournament in West Hamlin. And this tournament is held on a field that is named after Sam. Samantha played softball, and this was just to help remind the family that they would not forget about Sam.
With only 2 days left before Christmas, today's news from the president brought more grief to the community that knew and raised Samantha Burns. President Biden Monday morning announcing that he commuted the death sentences of Chadwick Folks and Brandon Basham. Both were accused of carjacking and killing Lincoln County native Samantha Burns. Eyewitness News spent years following the case, from the report of her missing to the arrest and subsequent trials of Folks and Basham in the deaths of Burns and South Carolina mother Alice Donovan. Both men would be sentenced to death in South Carolina.
Then drop the death sentence
On Basham
only.
While in prison, Folks would reveal the location of Donovan's body, allowing her family to lay her to rest. But the same would not be true for Samantha Burns. President Biden saying Monday that he condemns the actions of those on death row, but does not believe the death penalty should be used on the federal level, going on to say, quote, "These commutations are consistent with the moratorium my administration has imposed on federal executions in cases other than terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder." But not everyone agrees with his decision. Folks and Basham will spend the rest of their lives in prison.
But taking the death penalty away still feels like a slap in the face. Death penalty is so much harsher, and these men killed 2 women, one we can't even find, stole multiple cars, multiple belongings. They did constant drug use, went over multiple state lines, harassed people, tied that poor man to a tree. Why do we not think they deserve the death penalty? I mean, that is a lot of things in a very short amount of time. These people are not able to be rehabilitated. I'm just saying. They were 2 of 37 President Joe Biden commuted. And Senator Joe Manchin actually had something to say about this on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. After speaking to Samantha Burns' parents, I believe it is my duty to speak on decision to commute the death sentences for the 2 men convicted in her brutal murder is horribly misguided and insulting, particularly since Samantha's family wrote letters to President Biden and the Department of Justice pleading for them not to do this, but their concerns were unheard. I can't imagine the grief that Candy and John Burns are reliving and dealing with during the holiday season. As their U.S. Senator and a father, I want to express my deepest sympathy for their continued suffering. Please know that Samantha will forever be in our prayers. And if you know anything about this case, I know it's older, but any type of information could be useful. Please contact the West Virginia State Police at 304-528-5555 or the Q Center for Missing Persons at 910-345-1131, or a tip line for them also is 914-232-1687. And thank you guys so much for watching. This case was a wild ride, and it's still not finished. We need to find Samantha's body. Their family deserves this. I've never felt like we are so close. We know who did it. We know roundabout what happened. We just need this one puzzle piece, which is her body, and there has to be someone out there that knows something. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe for me, and hit that notification button. That way you're notified the next time I upload. On top of that, I do have a GoFundMe for Crystal Young. If you don't know why her mom needs this PI so bad, go watch that video. I still have stickers for sale. They're $2 each, and all proceeds go to the Cold Case Foundation, so it is for a good cause. And again, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting my videos and helping me get these stories out. And I'll see you in the next one.